okay, so the extraterrestrial hypothesis would explain the data, right? So, people see certain things, okay? And the extraterrestrial hypothesis would explain the data, okay? But it would require us also to address the probability of something traveling to us from a distant star system or something, right? It would require us to address the probability that these beings, when they're encountered, are bipedal and their eyes are in front of their head. Okay, so all these things that you wouldn't necessarily expect another species that evolved on another planet to share in common with us, these things seem to have in common. Okay. Mm-hmm. To make sense of that, people will say, well, maybe they're avatars, trying to look kind of like us, so that we can start to understand them, but they don't want to look completely like us because they want us to be surprised and things like that. That's fine. But what did you just do? You packed more information into your hypothesis, and thereby you've lowered the probability. Do you see that? So the more I claim, the lower the prima facie probability of my hypothesis, and then the stronger the evidence would have to be. Okay. So I think it's a very important point. So, and this is basically what Vallée does with the extraterrestrial hypothesis. He says, what are the chances that someone could fly here? What are the chances that they would look like us? What are the chances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And that seems to become this probability suck on the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Okay. So then people like Vallée and Hal Puthoff and Keel, I mentioned, go then for ultra terrestrial of some sort, or, Vallée will mention extra dimensional and stuff like that. Okay. That's great. But now you've got to, if they're ultra terrestrials, you've got to make sense of the fact that, we mostly don't see them. Okay. That they're this massive technological society that, goes undetected by us, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems like you're going to have to pack a bunch of stuff into that story that's going to lower the overall probability of the hypothesis. Okay. Which is always a problem. Now, what I'm proposing with the Uber-Umwelt terrestrial hypothesis is actually, I'm saying, well, we've already got concepts that are used in phenomenological philosophy, in cognitive science, that have very good explanatory value over there. So I'm not asking us to add a new thing, right? We can take things that are already fairly well verified from other disciplines and use those to explain all these weird questions we might ask about ultra terrestrials, right? Why don't we see them very often? Why don't we see traces of their history, et cetera, et cetera? Well, because they're in the Uber-Umwelt, and we would expect that there are things in the Uber-Umwelt that just are not on our perceptual radar, given our evolutionary history. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's the proposal I'm making. All right. And the idea is that this would be a way of getting out of the way of some of the sort of probability difficulties that you have for a standard ultra terrestrial hypothesis.
Mm-hmm. I like it a lot. And for context, we also have to fold in the definition of a hyper object. Yeah. But I really like the Pizza Hut analogy you have in the book. Conventional, cultural, simplified analogies really work good for me. And this Pizza Hut one is quite fun because it explains how something can be somewhat known, but also unknown in a different kind of context, in an umbrella kind of term context. But talk to us about that a little bit.
Sure. So the Pizza Hut example comes from another philosopher named Graham Harman. Okay. And he's kind of the founder, kind of the central figure in a school of thought called object-oriented ontology, triple O, that's what they call themselves. And I'm pretty much a fellow traveler with all that. And, the object-oriented ontologist is something similar to what we said already, is to say that objects show up for us given how we have a take on them, but they're always greater than just our take, right? The object always withdraws to some degree from our perception of it. Okay. And Harman, thinks that we need to take all objects seriously, that they're all on par with each other. Okay. And I'm going to kind of backtrack into some metaphysical stuff, if that's okay here. Okay.
Sure.
So, this is one of the central sort of debates in philosophy going back to Aristotle. Okay. So, Aristotle is an interesting, he's a ancient Athenian philosopher, right? Plato's student, right? And Aristotle was very impressed with the fact that the objects that we perceive are all composed of finer physical objects. Okay, so I can take this desk and we could break it down into like the sheets of wood and the screws and the glue and such. But then those things could be broken down. Those things could be broken down. But he figured that ultimately there's going to be some ultimate constituents, right? The elements. And for the Greeks, given their first try at chemistry, it was earth, air, water, and fire. Okay. And then the question for Aristotle comes up. Well, why would you think that there's a desk, that's a real thing, in addition to or over and above the earth, air, water, and fire? Why not just say it's just earth, air, water, and fire? Okay. And more importantly, why wouldn't you say about a cat that it's just the earth, air, water, and fire, and not something else called a cat? Why can't we just have a story at the very basic level? You mentioned materialism early, and really what Aristotle was worrying about was something like a very, very radical form of materialism, which interestingly was the older view. I mean, so the most early philosophers were some kind of materialist like that. Okay, so Aristotle though then says, well, I think we'll use the example of the cat is a real thing, okay, because even though the cat is composed of the earth, air, water, and fire, it has powers that the earth, air, water, and fire don't have. Okay, so like the elements don't hunt, right? The elements don't, chase other cats for reproductive purposes, right? The elements don't grow hair, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so he's not saying like the cat's some spooky thing in addition to the elements. He's just saying it's not the same thing as the elements, okay? Moreover, he says, look, the cat is constantly exchanging its elements with its environment, right? It sheds its hair, but it grows new hair. It eats tuna, right? And incorporates tuna itself. It lets yesterday's tuna remains go in the kitty box, all that stuff. Okay. So clearly it's changing elements over, but it remains the same cat. So he's saying the cat isn't just the elements. Okay. So Aristotle's impressed then that some things have powers that their parts don't have. And some things have, that they have a persistence that their parts don't have. Okay. All right. And so that kind of in the history of philosophy sort of becomes then the standard for saying a thing is a real substantial entity. Does it have its own powers and does it persist under its own conditions? Mm-hmm. Make sense?
Yeah. Like agency.
Yeah. Agency. Yeah. I like that. Okay. Agency and persistence. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, then Aristotle, though, thought really like that pretty much applied to organisms and nothing above that. Okay. So Aristotle would say, okay, so the elements are things. All right. And then like the parts of organisms are things, like the organs, they're things in a way. Okay. Then the organisms are, but then he doesn't go on and say like a population of cats is a thing. Okay. Or he doesn't say that a city is a thing in the way a human is a thing. He cuts it off. All right. So that for Aristotle, the real things are what I call, or following another philosopher, they're the middle-sized dry goods, right? They're the things that are like kind of medium-sized, right? They're not as fine as elements. They're not as big as cities. They're things like the cats, the other human beings, the tables, the chairs, the things that we can like get our hands on. Okay. Now you can see right away where one might worry about that. Well, wait, that's to say the real things are the things in our Umwelt. But wait, isn't there more to the world than just our Umwelt? Okay. Mm-hmm. And someone like Graham Harman, and I'm really following Graham Harman on this, will say, well, wait, what about Pizza Hut? Okay. So right now, if you go to your local Pizza Hut, all the workers there, they could all, die, right, and be replaced by new workers, right? And you'd still have the same Pizza Hut. All the machinery there could wear out and be replaced by new machinery. All the customers could come and go over a generation, but you'd still have the same Pizza Hut. So it looks like that Pizza Hut store has persistence that it's over and above its parts. Okay. Moreover, Harman would point out that Pizza Hut, we all behave differently when we're at Pizza Hut than we do at other places, right? The franchise exerts a certain kind of control over the people that work there, et cetera, et cetera. And so it looks like Pizza Hut has powers that its parts don't have. Okay. So Harman would say, and I think he's right, then we need to say in a similar way that we think that your cat is a real thing over and above its parts, so is Pizza Hut. It looks like Pizza Hut is an object, right, on its own, doing its own thing, and we're parts of it. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then Harmon will push it further. Okay. Well, then you've got like the corporation Pizza Hut, right? The people who work there, right? They all behave differently in virtue of working there. The corporation could survive all of them, right? So it seems like you're going to have to say that the Pizza Hut Inc. is an object now. Okay. And now look, as we do this, our objects are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're also getting further and further out from what you and I can really comprehend and understand. Like really, does anybody know what the hell is going on in a multinational corporation? No, right? And then Harmon will point out, like he'll say, the Civil War. Well, the Civil War, what is it? It's something composed of a bunch of human beings and machinery and things doing stuff. But nobody ran the Civil War. The Civil War really ran itself ultimately, right? It certainly survived the replacement of a lot of its parts. A generation of young men got changed over, unfortunately, in that war, right? And a lot of other people. Do you see that? So now it looks like, look, the Civil War looks like it's an object in the same sense that your cat is an object or you're an object. It's doing its own thing. It's running on its own steam. It has some kind of control over its parts, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And then people like a gentleman named Timothy, or someone named Timothy Morton, they came up with the idea of a hyperobject. Okay. And what is a hyperobject? It's an object that in its very nature only kind of dips its toe into our umwelt. We just get a little bit of taste in that thing. It just vastly, vastly, vastly outstrips what we could possibly fathom. He has in mind things like the environment, right? Or global warming. Or, he talks about like all the plastic in the world. What is that really up to? Okay. Cause Tim is an ecological thinker. Okay. And I think he's right about this. And so economies, histories, extended events, these all seem to be a kind of hyperobject that we aren't running. And in fact, they're running themselves, and we may be run by them.
Can you believe it, people? A video clip and a peek into how that sweet THC sausage is made. For some people, I'm sure it's nice to put a face to the name, so I started making clips that are a little more YouTube friendly than the full show tends to be. Get the full show on any podcasting platform. I prefer to keep it audio only, so we have a more decentralized distribution for a controversial show, and also so I can edit out the ums and ahs and barking dogs and all the things that happen when a person records in their home environment. And then if you really like the show, you can sign up for THC Plus, and instead of 1 hour interviews, you get the full 2 hour interview for just $8. I think that's a better deal, more of a win-win than asking you to support the show by booking a therapy session or buying generic Viagra. It's getting weird out there, folks. So just go to the highersidechats.com or click the link at the top of any set of show notes, and all your wildest dreams will come true. All right? All right.